You know, I can't do a series like this without addressing one very big thing, the 500-pound elephant in the room, if you will. It's something that is part of the genre, but nobody really takes seriously, well, except for the lulz. And that's the lost art of roleplay. World of Warcraft is one of the several games called an MMORPG. For those of you who don't speak the language, that's massively multiplayer online role-playing game. The first 3 parts are pretty easy to grasp, but it's the last 3 that seem to fall well short of the mark most of the time. But to that end, I realize I have very high standards, but a little backtracking is necessary. As I've talked about before, you can trace role-playing games back pretty far. I won't go into improvisational theater here, so I'll stick to paper gaming. While playing these games, a gamer goes through several stages of enjoyment. It starts with a hack and slash, but that gets boring after a little while. If they stick with it, then it usually graduates to light roleplay, usually involving nothing but Monty Python references.
You and all your silly English niggets.
Next is the snowflake principle, where each character has to be unique from their stereotype, eventually leading to making an average character and letting the events around them shape their personality. It's the later stages that make role-playing interesting. Now, some people might get way into it, like way far into it, like live the rollouts. Okay, nobody really does that. Well, not anyone who has a healthy mental state anyway. But for them, there's always LARPing or live-action role-play. And even here, there are hack and slashers and there are role players, and it's pretty obvious who's doing what. I'll admit that I'm really not much of a LARPer. You really don't want to put a fake sword in my hands and then set me loose on people. There will be blood. Oh yes. Yes, there will be. The closest I'll actually get to any type of a LARPing situation is paintball scenario games like this one. And even here there's range, so there's a buffer zone involved. But even in paintball scenario games, there are characters and there are roles, but there really isn't a lot of role-playing. And that's because people like action, not acting. And besides, action makes for better footage. So how does this relate to World of Warcraft? It may be important here to state a difference between fantasy role-playing and fantasy electronic role-playing. Console RPGs have been around for a long time, but most were hack and slash with a storyline that led you from point A to point B. Some of the PC games were more in-depth, but I really don't want to open that can of worms right now.
Kane, you still live. Ah, there you are. The writings in this place are incredible.
But what's puzzled me in my youth is that several so-called role-playing games that were on the old NES didn't involve any role-playing at all. For the most part, the games are just interactive stories that you couldn't progress until you grinded for hours and hours and got levels so you got enough power to kill the next boss. You don't get to really make decisions, you're just following the storyline. And yet people love this style of role-play, and I can't exactly figure out why. The same people who won't sit and actually read a book will sit for hours and hours and read badly translated dialogue and call it role-playing. You're not role-playing, you're leveling. And some people say, hey, you know, when they turn the console off, they're still thinking about the game, so that's kind of like role-playing, right? Yeah, sure. And the people who write dreary fanfic, they're actually role-playing too. Google it, I dare you.
Warning, the producers of the show are not responsible for brain injury nor emotional scarring from anyone actually searching on the term dreary. Search at your own risk. Brain bleach not included. We cannot guarantee the search has not come in contact with nut or nut oils.
Anyway, back to WoW. Okay, so MMORPGs aren't role-playing necessarily, but this leads to a phenomenon of constantly getting boned in the game. Okay, what am I referring to? Well, this is commonplace. You're starting a chain quest, and it's usually a fetch quest to go get items for this somebody, and as you're doing it, you're thinking, hey, what does this old dude need with all this old mystical stuff anyway? I'm about to get boned, aren't I? And hey, what do you know? You've been collecting all the stuff for the bad guy all along, and now the town is mad at you, and they want you to deal with the problem that you made. This isn't role-playing, this is just getting boned, shafted, screwed, blued, and tattooed. But in a role-playing game, the moment you realize you're about to get boned, you can say, hey, wait a minute, and then you can make a different decision. You can talk to the powers that be in town and warn them, or you can kill the old guy outright and not deal with it anymore. Heck, just don't even get this stuff and just move on with things. Whatever works within your character, it's all good. But no, the storyline dictates that you're gonna get boned over and over and over again. It seems to be a common theme in the game. I wonder what they're trying to tell us.
Turn you on.
That isn't to say there isn't role-playing going on these servers. In fact, there are several servers that are role-play specific, both PvP and PvE. But the thing is that on those servers, nobody really role-plays. People are just kind of doing their thing on there. And for the few people who are actually into role-playing, yeah, at best they get griefed, and at worst, they really get griefed. Ah, griefing. The art of gaining pleasure by ruining somebody else's perfectly good time, usually by being the biggest attention-whoring asshole that you can be. This can be anything from taunting nerd rage and train chat to, well, yeah. And what for? Well, just for the lulz, that's about it, really. You know, I partially wonder if these are the same kind of people who would grief a live-action role-playing event. They might be a little more hesitant when they realize that the combatants really are actually armed with swords and armor and really have no problem going after unarmed combatants. A lot of people can't comprehend why you would roleplay in WoW, but I can. It's a set-up universe. You can easily dress your toon in correct garb and play things out pretty easily, and unlike Ren fairs, it's always open. You can make a decent game out of an area or a dungeon as a group if you do it right. Balance the roleplay, a little combat, everyone can level up about the same pace, and you got a really fun campaign there. Most people jump into WoW with little to no aspiration to roleplay, and that's fine. Most of the vent chatter I've ever heard in my life has been less about character development and more about toon leveling, and for what it's worth, I don't think most of the WoW players would make even halfway decent roleplay material to begin with. It takes some imagination to roleplay, and most people turn that off when they turn the computer on. In fact, WoW is not really a role-playing game necessarily. In fact, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any MMORPG that actually is one. The reason is people are trying to sprint to the finish, so to that end, there's no time to roleplay. In fact, one of the online guides even promises 5 days to reach end content. When do you have time to roleplay in that? So, to that end, that's not really a role-playing game. Now, in the new stuff, in Cataclysm, they actually added some morality choices, even if those choices really have no end result on the quest. It's kind of nice to see it there, because it's kind of showing what player morality really is like, but it's still not role-playing. And in fact, you're not going to get true role-playing until you have a computer program that can actually do cause and effect on millions of decisions made daily. And I, for one, would not want to try to program morality into a computer.